Your best customers are paying you the least, and your worst customers are paying you the most. And this is why you have high churn. And the truth is, you don't have a product problem, you got a pricing problem. So in this video, I'm going to break down why high churn can be indicative of a pricing problem. It's not always a product problem, and what to do about it. First and foremost, let me give you a little bit of perspective here. So I also come from a product management background. I understand the pressure also from the board side to raise prices. A lot of CEOs go out there and to respond to the board, they will raise prices, change their pricing model to try to capture more value because that's what the board wanted them to do. In reality, what they end up doing is they end up misaligning a lot of the value and end up creating churn problems. And then they attack the problem on the product side when it's really a pricing issue. Well, let me break this down. So when we audit customers at Pricing.io, what ends up happening is we look at their base and we start breaking them into different cohorts. And so the customers that were on the old pricing model were around for a while. We collect data, nothing too crazy, right? We want to understand when they joined, how much they're paying, what products they have, what model they're on, things like that. And then we'll start sorting them around and understanding different patterns that start to emerge. We'll look at the top NRR, the ones that expand the most, buy the most, renew the most, and then compare it to what they're paying. And so your top NRR expansion customers versus the LTV, if you're seeing that customers that are expanding and getting the most value actually paying you the least, or the other way around, customers that are not getting much value and are paying you the most, these are going to be the signs that you have a pricing issue. We'll also look at different churn reasons, understanding why they're leaving. So if customers are indicating, hey, we're not using the product enough, or we think it's too expensive for our use case or what we're trying to do, that's typically not a product issue. That's usually a value or pricing issue in disguise. And so you have to really dig between those to really understand what's happening. But oftentimes what you're seeing is there's a segmentation problem. There's an alignment to their time to value. And these are things that you can fix in the pricing model. So don't worry if you think there's a pricing issue behind your churn, because this is fixable. So let's break this down a little bit further, right? So there are really three main things to look for, or causes of pricing driven churn. All right, if you think about it that way. So the first main cause is you don't have the right value metric in place. You're actually charging for the wrong thing. That's one of the biggest drivers of pricing related churn. And that's one of the biggest ways you can get misalignment with your customer. And so what ends up happening is you're charging them for something that doesn't align with how they're using it. You'll find customers use it a lot and pay a little, customers that use it a little pay a lot, and that ends up driving a lot of the issues. The second biggest one that drives a lot of churn from a pricing perspective is the wrong segmentation. And so you have different customers, you're not identifying the right groups in terms of what type of value they want and how much value they want. So oftentimes, if you're using like a size-based segmentation, where small, medium, and large, a lot of companies, they start there, and that's okay. Small, medium, large, they have differences. I get it. But as they use the product and as you learn about your customers more, you need to go beyond just size. You need to look at their complexity, their maturity, how fast they're changing, how complex their customers are in their industries that they're serving are, and be able to use that and factor it in to the segmentation, because that actually determines how much value they need from you. The third biggest driving cause of churn from a pricing perspective is what I call time to value mismatch, right? So you're kind of charging them too much or trying to capture too much of that value up front if they maybe don't get the value for like 6 to 9 months after they adopted the solution. And that can create a lot of problems. And so this also comes from a lot of board pressure where, you're under the microscope to try to capture more money, but maybe you haven't reoriented to understanding what the value curve looks like for your customers. And so some value happens in a cycle, some happens maybe way backloaded. For example, like heavy compliance software could take a long time to adopt. And so you want to make sure that the way your pricing is aligns with that. And the best thing to do typically is to simplify your pricing and packaging in order to charge a little less upfront, but then charge as they continue to hit milestones in the product, and you actually can increase that LTV sharply over time. In other cases, your bigger, more complex enterprise clients are probably underpriced as well. They're not fairly paying for the value that they're getting. And so those are two of the most common ways to address that. And so to summarize, the three biggest pricing driven churn items are going to be the wrong value metric, going to be wrong segmentation, and then a misalignment in time to value. So those are the big three causes of pricing driven churn. Quick example, if you're a workflow automation company and you're charging by the user, but realizing that as you look at your cohorts, that you're seeing that those that are driving a lot of workflow automations are not paying you more. Like those that are maybe using it less are paying more. Those that are using it more are paying less. That's where you start to realize and understand the problems. And you may want to switch from that user-based pricing to workflow automations as an example. But here's how we diagnose this at Pricing.io. We see this all the time, right? So the first step that we do is we segment the base and we want to break them down into different cohorts. Like I mentioned, there's a basic elements of data, who your customers are, when do they start, what do they pay, what do they use, those kind of key things. And if you don't have those things, then that's another issue for another video that we can talk about, but you should have some basic metrics around your customers and what they're doing. From there, you start with the sorting and understanding, again, top to bottom, who are your biggest expanders, who are your biggest payers, understanding also any mixes or any usage patterns where you see any sharp increases or power usage. Look for those things in the data, and that allows you to look for misalignment as well as for candidates for your value metric. So segment and then sort. Those are the first two things you want to do. And after you have the segment and sort and you start seeing different misalignments within the data, you could also look at survey data on churn customers. You could look at NPS survey data, CSAT survey data. You could do interviews. There's lots of ways to get this information, but you can also, validate and see why customers are leaving. And again, if you're looking at that information and seeing things like not enough value, too expensive for what I want, never really got deep into the product, all those key things, that's usually a sign that there's a price to value mismatch, a time to value mismatch, all these key things. And so if you see that, plus some of the data mismatch in your sorting and segmentation, those are really good flags that you need to address the pricing versus the product. All right. So once you've done all this, what do you do next? How do you then take a step forward? I have a quick framework to share for you, just a quick 5 steps on how to address this, right? And this kind of goes along the lines of the diagnostic and everything we've talked about already, right? So the first step is segment your customers. Get the data, simple data extract of all your customers in your base, and then you want to start sorting these guys out, again, by NRR, expansion, by LTV, and by usage patterns, whether it's documents uploaded or downloads or messages, whatever that is. Use it and look through those volumes and see where those misalignments are. So the first thing is segment. The second step is to go to align the right value metric. So in those patterns, if you're seeing your best expanders, if you're seeing that the usage goes up in a predictable way and aligns really well with your segmentation, then you want to start using those candidates to figure out which value metric makes the most sense. Oftentimes it's the one you can see, the one you can measure, the one you can implement and track, all those key things. But if you're seeing, messages downloaded, or if you're seeing transactions approved over and over again, and that's what's increasing over time, then those could be the right value metric targets, right? So you segment, you look for the pattern for the value metric to align. So segment, align. The third thing to do is account for time to value. So when do they actually reach these increases? Are they slow up front to get going and then time accumulates and then they're able to really get the value later? Do they get this value immediately? Does it happen in different cycles? Understand that time to value. It's going to help you with your packaging and aligning price to value so that way they pay when they're feeling value, not the other way around, which leads to churn. Step 4, you want to test with customers at risk. So this means let's take a small group of customers that you think are showing signs or indication that they may churn or not renew, and then you can introduce the new package, the new metric to them and get their feedback. Hey, this is actually a lot better for me. This aligns a lot more with where I see the value and where I'm at. And so if you're seeing success and getting feedback there, then that's what you want. So test and then finally start migrating those customers over. And when I say migrate over, not all at once, do it in cohorts and maybe even like a risk-based cohort. And so you handle each one in the migration. So that way you understand how you need to negotiate and navigate as you move them over. And you'll get better over time. So the more you do this, the better you get, right? That's the key. So with this framework, the 5 big steps, just to summarize again, segment your customers, align with the value metric, be careful to factor in and account for time to value. And then from there, test with a small group. And then number 5, start to roll out. So that's the big framework to attack this pricing problem in 5 steps. Okay, so what do you need to do next? The bottom line is that high churn is not always a product problem. Most of CEOs are looking at the product when they see high churn. Look at the pricing problem. You're likely misaligned. You're charging for the wrong thing. You have your segmentation is off. You're not accounting for time to value. You're charging too soon for value that's not realized yet, things like that. And so from my perspective, you want to make sure to ask yourself those questions first. Are we seeing some of our customers that are our best customers paying us the least? And are we seeing some of our worst customers that are churning, paying the most? That's usually a tall tale sign and a red flag and that you have a pricing problem that's driving that high churn. So ask yourself these questions before just diving in and doing a crusade to fix the product. You may not even have to fix the product, right? Fixing a pricing problem, by the way, is not only fixable, it's also faster than fixing the product, right? That's usually a lot longer cycle. So fix the pricing before you fix the product if you indeed have some of these issues that I talked about. The next thing you want to do also is just read street pricing. So read street pricing, I have chapters dedicated to digging deeper into customer value. I also talk a lot about ways and signals to see where that value is misaligned. You could also just reach out to us at pricingio.com, have a quick chat with us to understand a little bit if this is really a pricing problem you're having and options to fix it. So final thought, rather than blame the product, ask yourself these questions, run the diagnostic, and really understand if you have a pricing problem that's driving the high churn. Because if you can do that, that's fixable, and that'll also have immediate impact and bear a lot more fruit than changing the product in 6 to 12 months.